Hi guys, been asked to do some recordings for you guys for the exam. You got the exam in 2 weeks' time, as you know. So I'm just looking at regards to this particular slideshow and recording. I'm just looking at activity 1 and activity 4, which is the written part of the exam. Activity 1 is about commercial risk. Activity 4 is about commercial intelligence. Okay. So they're both the written element of the course, and we really went through these back in the first term. So it's just trying, and we went through it in some detail in the first term, because it's just really trying to sort of use all that detail that we did and start to apply it to the case studies that you've got in the exam. So remember, the exam is 12 hours long over 3 days. So you've got 4 hours over 3 days. It's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Probably start at around 10 o'clock. Do 2 hours, have some lunch, do another 2 hours, end of the day. And the same then on Tuesday, the same on Wednesday as well. So my suggestion, looking at the exam, spend the first 4 hours, if you like, or the first day, the Monday, completing these written activities. And what that allows you to do by the end of the day is you can work out the percentage for overheads and profit, which you can add to the bills of quantities in activity 3, which I would complete on the final day. All right. We've had quite a bit of practice over the last 4 or 5 weeks regarding completing a bill of quantities. Prior to that, we sort of did a lot of preliminaries and we did some maths. So we've been working for the last 6 to 8 weeks on delivering and practicing the mathematical element of it. Okay, so I'm taking you back now to the first term, and it's what I'm going to sort of do during the lessons next week, because I appreciate quite a few will be off because of Eid. One of the reasons why I'm doing this video as well. So the aim really, obviously I'd like you to get more marks than this, but the aim really is to get you about 18 to 20 marks out of a potential of 28 on offer with regards to the written part of the exam. All right, and hopefully then, if you do that on the first day, I think your confidence levels then will shoot up, and it'll give you that too. You can, third day, I would sort of calculate the unit rates. The second day, calculate the unit rates, and then the third day, then I would just concentrate on completing the bill of quantities, completing the preliminaries, and if you can try and get around 28, about 20 marks out of the 28 on offer, you're sort of nearly at the pass mark there. And just the maths then, if you get the preliminaries right, the bill of quantities right, there's 4 or 5 marks there. Get a couple of the easy unit rates, again 4 or 5 marks, and you're alluding towards hopefully a merit. But so it is really important is not to forget the written part, particularly if you're not confident with maths, because obviously, if you really work on this bit, there's much more on offer you than just 20 marks. You've got 28. If you get 25 out of 28 or 24 out of 28, you're then on for a pass and you're not far off a merit then. So it's really up to you. It's just a suggestion, that's all. So I'm using the 2023 exam as my vehicle. All right, and the first part of the presentation will be on commercial risk, which is activity 1, and the second part will be on commercial intelligence, which will be on activity 4. So it's the first and the last activities. You've got 4 activities altogether. Okay, the mathematical element is activity 2 and 3. So as time goes on, I will obviously produce some more presentations and upload them onto YouTube as well. So activity 1, let's look at it, okay? It's an important area it's an important area and allows you to achieve straightforward marks, I think. It's worth 20% of the overall marks. I know it's only 12, but it's 12 out of sort of 63, which works out at 20%. So you're looking really, obviously I'd like to get 12 out of 12, but if we're realistic here, we'll be looking to get about 8 or 10 marks. And I think if you can get 8 or 10 marks, you're really on for, you've got a good answer there. All right, and you're on for a good pass merit, but also you're setting yourself up for a really good merit, or certainly a really good distinction, okay? According to the examiner's comments, just to let you know, and again, they are up on Canvas so that you can read them at your own sort of leisure. But if we just particularly be specific about activity 1, distinction level learners for activity 1 are able to focus on some key commercial risks, and it's these that we're going to discuss in the next couple of slides, okay? All right, and what he goes on to say as well, or she goes on to say, in addition, the examiner's report suggests distinction level learners generally also consider other factors that lessen the risk. So you highlight the risk, explain what the risks are, and then if there's a chance, you might not get a chance, how you're going to make some sort of suggestions, how you're going to lessen the commercial risks. The word that we would use is mitigate, but ultimately it means to lessen, to minimize. All right, so that's ultimately what a good distinction learner will be able to do. All right, pass sort of learners are very generic. They talk about very general risks, they highlight the risks, but they don't go into too much detail, they don't explore it in too much detail, they don't make reference to the case study. Where distinction and merit learners will make a lot of reference to the case study, okay? So just moving on now, okay, we'll look at some of the risks. All right, so one of the things that you have on the first day of the exam, you have 30 minutes prep time, okay, in addition to those 12 hours that you've got, okay? So you've got this 30 minutes prep time, where you can look at the case study and analyze it at depth. So the first day we'll start at 9:30 with the exam. You'll have 30 minutes prep time under exam conditions, and then the exam proper will start at 10 o'clock, okay, in the morning. All right, so you have 30 minutes. Really use this time wisely. Don't waste it. Analyze the case study. I will bring some highlighter pens with me, but try to buy some highlighter pens or borrow some from siblings and make some notes with regard to the case study that you're given, which is the first 10 pages. There's quite a lot of information, I'm afraid. All right, so there's a lot of information to wade through, but if you do it in that 30 minutes, maybe even a little bit more, spend another 30 minutes after the exam officially starts, the more you analyze, the more you understand the problem, and the more you'll understand what's required from the exam. And what that will do, it will help you achieve the higher grades. All right, I always say highlight, make notes, spend at least, and I'm emphasizing this, at least 30 minutes. I would even recommend a little bit longer as well, 45 even to an hour. Get to really understand that case study, okay? All right, so look for those key commercial risks. They'll be there, there'll be clues in the case study. Look at some of the project risks. Again, there'll be clues in the case study. Look for ways to minimize those risks. Again, there'll be clues in the case study. You don't have to be a fantastic genius. The clues will all be in the case study, okay? And what we're generally looking at with commercial risks are things like, and as I say, we covered these in a lot of detail. There's a lot of notes on Canvas. The contractor's current workload, their turnover. Remember, their turnover is how much money they turn over. on a regular basis, usually an annual basis or a monthly basis or a 6-monthly basis. Turnover is not profit. So basically, turnover is the total amount of money that you make, and then you take out all your costs and overheads, and then you're reduced with probably 2 to 5%, which would be your profit, hopefully. You might not even make a profit. Some years you don't make a profit, I'm afraid, okay? So you would look at that. That will be in the case study. The liquidated and ascertained damages, okay? LADs, we call them for short. Liquidated and ascertained damages are written in the contract. They are a weekly figure, 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 per week. And basically, you're not supposed to call them this in law, but we tend to. Penalty clauses, they're a penalty, hence the term penalty clauses. And you're given a date where you're going to finish the contract. If you don't finish by that date, then you will be charged £50,000, £60,000 per week for every week that you go over that agreed finish time, that agreed finish date. So really important, look for the liquidated damages, look for the time frame, okay? The other thing is, and we calculated these a couple of weeks ago, a fluctuating price. Not every contract will have a fluctuating clause in it. There'll be a fixed price. Remember, again, I think I'm going back to about October or November here. Remember I said that in the contract, if it's fixed price, which usually it is, it's usually a fixed price contract. If you've got a contract that's going to take six months, 26 weeks, or 52 weeks, 12 months, then prices may change over the duration of the project. But you priced or you submitted your bid maybe maybe even a year previously. So you haven't made any, there's a risk that the prices for labor, plant and materials will increase. So you've sort of got to make an adjustment maybe based on that. If you've got a clause in the contract which allows for fluctuations, you can calculate it as we did a couple of weeks ago, and you can add it in maybe 5%, 7% for fluctuations because of inflation. It's a long contract, 12 months to 15 months. Some of the contracts that we did, projects, sorry, when I say contract, I mean projects. Some of the projects that we did about 4 or 5 weeks ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, that's fine. You've got a clause in there that covers those fluctuations, but not every contract will have a fluctuation clause, okay? Experience of the contractor in this particular field of work. Is it new? Are they going into a new field of work, or have they already got experience? If they've got experience, you're fine. Well, you're not fine, but it lessens the risk. It's one of the ways that risk can be mitigated or minimized. Obviously, if you're new, if you're a house builder and suddenly you decide to become going to building factories, it's new for you. So it's a higher risk. It's a higher risk endeavor. All right. Obviously, your own contractual financial position. Are you in a good position? Are you in a bad position? Do you really need the work, or don't you? You know, you might not feel that you need the work at this moment in time. There's more of a risk actually winning the contract than actually not winning the contract. So what sort of strategies do you put in place? Because you don't want to upset the client by saying, oh, look, I'm not going for the project. I'm not going to make a tender bid. You still want to make a tender bid because you want to keep the client happy ultimately. You want to stay on the good side of the client. So what are you going to do? I don't really want to win the contract, but because I've got lots of work on, or my financial status is really good, and this particular project looks risky to me. So what am I going to do? So we're going to discuss some of those mitigating strategies, okay? And then you've got the project risks, then the locality of the project, the ground conditions. You know, if you've got a lot of water on site, if you need to maybe do some preliminary work before the contract actually starts. You know, if you've got contaminated soils, you'll have to do some remediation work. You might not know how much soil requires remediation. You might not know how much how much drainage is required before the project actually starts. You know, remember those well point systems that we looked at in Unit 4 last year? You know, they cost a lot of money. All right, and they bring their own problems with them. So look at project risks. The locality. Is there a lot of theft? Is there a lot of vandalism? Do you need extra security? Do you need a huge fence around it? You know, do you need hoarding? All of these again brings their own problems. Okay, so security there. Contractual risks. All right, is there a contract? Is it a JCT? Is it an NEC? So what type of JCT is it? You know, what type of NEC form of contract is it? Generally speaking, they usually give you the JCT, so that's a good thing. Has it got a bill of quantities? Well, yes, it will definitely have a bill of quantities, because one of your tasks is to actually fill in a bill of quantities. So we know it's got a bill of quantities. Now, bills of quantities minimize risk. Okay, having a contract, particularly JCT or NEC, even more so, minimize risk. All right, for the contractors. Okay. Again, going back to key project risks, liquidated and uncertain damages. How much per week will I be penalised if I don't meet the target date? All of these things, just to reinforce. Okay, guys? I'm just going to move on. We're going to look at those risks now in a lot of detail. Okay, in a lot of detail. So what I've done now is I've gone through the 2023 paper and I've highlighted some of the issues, and I made some notes, not everywhere. I've made notes everywhere, but I just wanted to show you really what you should do in that first 30 minutes. Okay, even an hour, even if it takes you an hour, don't rush these things. All right, you've got 12 hours. Okay, so you're an assistant estimator. It's a local construction company. Remember, you're working for the contractor, not the client, because some candidates make that mistake. They think they're working for the client, and I think I've mentioned this many times to you in the first term. Okay, you are working for the contractor. Okay, you are working it as the capacity as an estimator or an assistant estimator. So I'm highlighting some stuff there. Okay, the name of your company is Holburn, okay, or High Holburn Contracting Limited. This is who you work for, okay? It's an annual turnover of £22 million, so they're pretty good. They've got quite a lot of work on. £22 million is a lot of money, as you can imagine. Not the biggest contractors, you know, the big contractors, 50 to 100 million pound a year turnover, some billions of pounds a year turnover. Okay, 22 million is okay. Usually what a sort of small regional firm that does general contracting would actually turn over on a regular basis. Okay, remember, it's not profit. Turnover is the money that you accrue, that you collect as a result of all the work you've got. You then take out all the costs and overheads to work out your profit. Okay, so profit is just a small part of your turnover, but you need that money to keep the bank happy, because you've got to show to the bank that money is flowing in and out of your bank account. And therefore, if you need a loan or if you need to have a big overdraft, then the bank can see that you're a safe bet. So turnover is really important, because ultimately it tells us how liquid we actually are. Our cash flow, what's coming in, what's going out, is it coming in regularly? You know, can we meet our liabilities? You know, can we meet the costs, etc., etc. So it's really important. All right. The company works it's a general contractor. Okay, housing projects, school extensions, industrial and commercial projects. Okay, so it's a general contractor. So if the project is something specialist, it'll be a greater risk. However, if the project is house building, extensions, industrial buildings or commercial buildings, then to be honest, the risks are a lot less for a company like High Holborn, okay? So that's really important. That's why I've highlighted that, okay? And if you look at the project, I should have highlighted this, but if you look at the project, it's an extension of an office building. So it's a commercial building and it's an extension. So the project for this particular company is not that risky because they're familiar with it and it's within their locality. Again, the risk increases as you move out of their locality. All right, so quite low risk there. All right, so quite low risk. Okay, so a little bit more. I've put them in different colors there. Okay, so again, I'm highlighting, making notes, highlighting, making notes. Okay, so just to sort of let you know. All right, yeah. The contractor employs directly, so not many subcontractors. It only takes on subcontractors if it's got a lot of work on and it it doesn't have enough directly employed labor. So again, I remember teaching this back in November, December. The supply chain here is it's not very long. There's not many subcontractors involved in it, so that minimizes risk. Okay, so that minimizes risk. That's really good. Okay. The largest contract that the company has ever done is about 5 million, 4.2 million. So it can go up to contracts of 4 million. Generally, anything from 1,000, because it does some maintenance work as well, generally from 1,000 up to about 4 million. So an extension of an office will be £1 or £2 million, maybe 3 at most. So it's well within its what it can do, what it's sort of set up to do. Okay, it's not going outside its comfort zone, so it's not a risky sort of project for it. Okay, at the moment. All right. The thing is with the contractor, though, okay, is that it's had some difficult times. All right, and ultimately, what that means is the market in this particular area is not very buoyant at the moment. It's quite depressed. So there's a lot of competition because obviously they're going through an economic downturn. All right. Okay. So that's the question now. Do they really want to win this contract? Because they're going to be up against some really sort of highly competitive firms. All right, and that takes us obviously on to commercial intelligence, but they're going to be on to some, so that has a bearing as well who they're sort of up against, who they're competing against. All right, they made a loss last year, so despite that 22 million turnover, they actually made a loss of £500,000. So they're looking to recoup that probably. So they're not really, their ultimate aim is probably to keep trading at the moment. Like all other contractors, they probably are not looking to expand. They're not looking to contract either. So they're looking to keep probably to make around £22 million turnover in this particular tax year, and hopefully as well repay some of that debt off. So they may need to win this contract. We don't sort of know yet. All right. So you see what I'm doing here? By doing this highlighting, I'm building a story. And that's really what we want to do, is build a story. Okay. So if we look at the next note there, all right. I have to look a bit closer, sorry. Okay, so they've got a head office. Okay. Obviously, if you have a head office, that's going to cost you money. That's head office overheads. You have to pay for all the staff, the heating, the building. You may be renting it. You may have bought it, so you might have a mortgage with it. Okay. So at the moment, head office overheads is 1.5 million. So out of that 22 million turnover, they've got to allocate 1.5 million for head office overheads because they need a base. All right, they need property, they need a base. Okay, sorry, because it's quite small on my screen, so if you see my face go really close, I do apologize. All right. It's quite manageable. It works out at around 6.8%, so it's around 7%. So head office overheads is around 7%. That's actually pretty good. Actually, it's quite low, but that's because they're a local firm. If they were a national or a regional firm, their head office overheads obviously would be much greater. Okay, because they might be based in London or in a big city like Birmingham, where the rents, the mortgages would be really, really high, property prices would be really, really high. But they're a small local company or a middle-sized local company. So the beauty of that is it allows them to be competitive within that location. So financially speaking, yes, they've made a loss last year. However, with regards to a lot of what they've got to cover money-wise, they're not in a bad financial position. Okay, so just to sort of let you know. All right, yeah. Recent tendering activity, local competitor. All right. So profit and overheads margins are low. Okay, because they don't have to, so because they're in a poor sort of economy at the moment. So they've won some, they've been successful. They've got 2.2 million there, another 1.2 million there, and another 1.7. So they're going for work and winning work between 1 million and 2 million. They do have the capacity to do 4 million. So again, this extension I would have thought would be something in the region of 1 to 2 million, maybe 3 million at most. So it's well within their capacity. So that's a low risk for them. Okay. All right. So, and it's in the locality for them. So it's pretty good. All right. So again, low risk with regards to that. Again, you can see now this time with this one, this is about the economic climate. It's about the project documents as well. Okay, the problem that you got is the economic climate is not very good in this particular case study. The market is quite depressed, and what that means is there's a lot of contractors looking for work. All right, looking for work. So that means a lot of people will be bidding for this particular project. And also it means that a lot of people from outside the area will be bidding for this project because they'll be looking for work. Even if it's for work that they're not used to, they'll just be looking for work, as I say, just to keep that turnover going so they don't go bust, don't go bankrupt during this really depressed period. So they've got to try and keep going, even if they're not sort of making any profit. Even if sometimes they're operating at a little bit of a loss, you're really waiting, if you like, for the good times to come back, because our industry is very similar to the British economy. It's cyclical. It goes in cycles. It's very competitive one minute, depressed the other, and we're in one of those depressed sort of times, according to this case study. Okay, and then we sort of get to understand as well. All right. That the contractor is actually, in this particular financial year, the contractor that we work in for High Holborn has actually achieved 90% of its annual turnover so far, which is good. So they've only got to reach that £22 million. They've only got to get another 10%. Okay, which is pretty good, which is about 2 million, 3 million. Yeah. So if they won this contract, they'd actually meet their targeted turnover for the year, and maybe even a little bit more. So there's some good things there. So for us there, and we'll talk about them particularly when we're talking about activity 4. So there's some other bad things though with this particular project, I'm afraid. Okay. But there's also some good things. So it's a JCT 2016 Joint Council Tribunal, so it's a standard form of contract. That's really good. That minimizes the risk for both the client and the contractor, because basically it's standard terms and conditions that everybody in the industry is used to working with. So it's not a sort of contract being made up by lawyers. It's just taken off the shelf. All right, so it suits both the client and the contractor. Okay, so there's some good stuff there. Okay, there is only the problem that you've got is a 16-week contract. That's not too bad, but it means fast track construction maybe, because 16 weeks is only 4 months, 5 months maybe at most, and you've got very high liquidated and uncertain damages, which I think are £85,000. So what you're saying is, if the contract is 16 weeks and it takes you 20 weeks, another month to do it, then you'll be charged 4 weeks at £85,000. So you're basically going to lose, what's that, 170. So basically you're going to lose about £300,000, £400,000 if you go over by a month. So that's a lot of money. That's your profit gone, and you're making a loss straight away. So you're going to be eating into that. You're going to be adding to the £500,000 loss that you made the previous year. So in your profits the previous year, so it's going to eat into all your profits, I'm afraid. Okay, so that's a big risk there. Okay, it's a fixed price contract as well. So that's a problem as well. Although it's 4 months, especially with the depressed market, with the increase in probably interest rates and inflation during a depressed market, it could have a bearing on costs with regards to labour, plant and materials. Okay, they could increase dramatically in the 4 months that you are working. All right, so these are some of the issues. Okay, so highlight what you can, look for them, spend as you can see. It's really important. You can see that I understood the project quite well, and only went through it last night, to be honest with you, for 30 minutes, 40 minutes. A little bit different for me because I've got that experience. Okay, so one of the issues I identify, which I sort of have identified there as well, the client has an issue as well. So look for any issues with the client. I appreciate you don't work for the client. However, the client's paying your bills. And if you look at the case study, it says that the tenants who with regards to the client's property are not paying them 50%, I think it says. Yeah. And because it's a depressed market, not many businesses, because we're talking about commercial sort of rent, leases, not many businesses are looking to set themselves up at the moment because the market is depressed. So property is there's quite a lot of empty properties about. So they're not generating any cash flow themselves. All right. So therefore, the client might not be able to generate enough money, enough cash. Liquidity is another sort of word for it, to fund the project. So you might go through all this process of tendering, which costs you a lot of money, by the way, only to find out that the project's not going ahead at that particular moment in time. What the client might decide to do, they've taken the bids, and then they might turn around and say, well, look, based on the bids that we've got at the moment, we can't afford £3 or £4 million. We're just going to wait for the market to turn around, and maybe we'll look to do our extension again. So you've got that issue, which is point 3 there. All right. Point 4, which is the worst case scenario for any contractor, is the client might go bankrupt during the construction phase. Okay. And therefore, you then, as the contractor, when I say you, I mean the contractor, the people in High Holborn, are put in a precarious financial position. All right, and when I say you, the contractor, High Holborn, could suffer great consequences in terms of your own cash flow and liquidity, and hence you could actually go into liquidation as well, and because these things tend to have a sort of knock-on effect. All right, so there's one key issue there. There's 3 or 4 marks there for you. All right, just on that, just that one issue. The second one is the short duration, 16 weeks, and the high amount of liquidated damages. All right, so you'd have to take account for that. You'd have to be careful on that because of the completion date. So one of the mitigations with that is the fact that you are an experienced contractor with regards to this type of work, and you understand the market in that locality because you're based in that locality. So one could argue that you should be able to complete that within 16 weeks, no problem at all. You should have the experience and the staff that and the employees that are used to doing that. Okay, that type of quick turnover, fast track construction, if you like. All right. However, to get it within, you know, £1 or £2 million contracts within 16 weeks requires extra resources. Okay. All right. So you'll need extra plant. You'll need extra equipment. Yeah. So that's cost money. So you've got to take that into consideration when you're sort of doing your unit rates, when you are adding overheads and profit on for a percentage. Okay, so there's some issues there. All right. So despite the risks, the contractor may have to see a small profit margin to win the contract, as the market is not very good. So the market not being buoyant is the third one. Okay, so there's 3 or 4 marks per sort of, you know, per key issue. You're looking to sort of identify 4 or 5 key issues. Okay, so to get your full marks. Yeah, so small profit margin, because as I say, the market's depressed. Yeah, and if you want to win the contract, you may have to sort of cut your profit margin, the percentage for your profit. Also, the contractor is short of their annual turnover. Okay, and they certainly need to cover 1.5 million of their office costs. Okay, so again, there's another issue there. So you may, you know, there's some risks there if you don't win the contract. All right, so the contract itself, the project itself, is quite risky, but there are other risks with regards to not going for it. Okay, financial risks. Okay, key issue 4 is a fixed price contract. So it doesn't take into consideration any fluctuations, any changes. That means in price over the 16 weeks. And because the economy is not very good, high inflation, high interest rates probably, then labour, material and plants could increase at any time, and they could increase dramatically. All right. However, again, we're talking about mitigation, minimization. All right. The impact might be minimized by the fact it is a short contract. So, you know, it's really, there may not be that many sort of issues surrounding high sort of costs. Labour and plant and material and plant costs may not be that may not affect the project because it's such a short duration, 4 months, 16 weeks. In addition, you're not employing many subcontractors, you're employing direct labour. So again, you know, their sort of wages are going to remain very, 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 very stable. So labor prices probably would remain very stable for you because you've got a lot of direct employees. So again, there's another mitigation there as well. All right. There's some other issues. There's about 5 issues. There are also some positive stuff. I've just mentioned a couple of the positive stuffs. The short duration of the contract could be a positive, although it's a bit of a negative. So you've got to weigh them up. The fact that you employ a lot of direct labour is a positive. That minimise your risk with regards to labour costs, which you probably would be quite high if you had a lot of subcontractors. Okay. Some of the positives there, though, standard form of contract. So don't forget to write some of the positives as well as the negatives. Okay. These minimise your risks. Okay. It's governed through rules of fairness and trying to work together, partnerships. All right. So so it sort of protects both the contractor and the client. There's a bill of quantities, we know that. Okay, it might not say it, but you always have a bill of quantities. So there's always going to be that positive thing that you might want to mention. Okay, the beauty of the bill of quantities, it's created by the client's quantity surveyor. So the risk, if there's any problems inside the bill of quantities, it hasn't been measured properly. The descriptions in the bill of quantities don't match the drawings or the specifications, then that risk is borne, if you like, is given to the client, not you. So that's the beauty of a bill of quantities. It reduces the risk for a contractor. Okay. When I say contractor, that's you, the person carrying out the high oil burn. Okay. The contractor is experienced. That's really important, and there is and understands the market as well, because it's a local market. So we'll know who the best suppliers are, who the best subcontractors are, who the best plant and equipment people are in that particular area. So who are the best people to work with. All right. So even though it's 16 weeks, which is quite a high risk, it's minimized by the fact that it's work that you've done regularly. You're used to doing commercial work, offices, factories. You're used to doing extensions. So the project actually and the nature of the project is something that you're familiar with. So it's a real positive for you guys, High Alburn, the people that you're working for. All right. So there I've outlined all the risks. The most important risks, okay? You've got four really important risks that you write in detail what they are, why they are important, and then you can talk about the positive risks, if you like, or the things that minimize the risks. There's nothing positive about a risk, but the things that minimize the risk. You know, the fact that it's a JCT, and I would say categorically they're always going to give you, looking at the past papers, it's always going to be a JCT form of contract. So that's one way of minimizing the risk. You know, from your experience of pricing, from creating and calculating unit rates, that it's always going to be a bill of quantities. These things minimize the risk. Look to see what the market is like. Look to see whether it's work that they are familiar with, because these are the things that will minimize your risk. Okay. So once you've done that and you've written that, there's a good 12 marks there for you. All right. All of what I've done there is that's the sort of stuff that you'd have to write about for a distinction. Okay, to get about 10 marks. All right. In a nice flowing style. Okay, obviously written style, there's 3 or 4 marks on offer for how you present your report. Okay, all right. So you know, if it's presented in bullet points and a little bit all over the place, no flow or logical manner, you're going to be downgraded. You know, you're going to lose 2 or 3 marks there. So you're going down to be marked out of 10 rather than 12. So then you could be going down to about 6 or 7 marks. So you start to really lose marks. So if you're looking for a distinction, make sure you sort of organize it so it's done in a nice, flowing, logical manner that you can all do. You know, you've done it loads of times with the assignments. Okay, so that's activity 1. All right. So there's 12 marks. What we're going to look at now is activity 4, which is I know it says part 2, but it's about activity 4. So what you do is you take those risks that you've identified, those 4 or 5 risks. You look at the commercial intelligence that you've got, and then you make a decision. Do I go for I'll be careful how I word this. When I say I mean the contractor, High Alburn. Does High Alburn make a competitive tender bid, or do they say, well, look, I don't really want this job, but what I'll do is I'll make sure I put a bid in to keep the client happy, but I'll put a ridiculous percentage in for my profit. I'll put 10% profit in rather than 5%. And if I win the contract, yeah, okay, it's risky, but I know I'm actually going to make a lot of profit, yeah. So you know, it's a risk what you do. All right. So once you've got that information, see, once you've done all your maths, then on Wednesday, you know what percentage you're going to put in your bill of quantities. So that's why I suggest that you do activity 1 and activity 4 on the first day, and then leave the maths and the bill of quantities, the unit rate and the bill of quantities, preliminaries, etc., till the last 2 days, because you sort of know where you're going to pitch yourself there. All right. Okay. So we're looking for justification for the tender sum. All right. The objective really of activity 4 is to propose a tender strategy. When we say tender strategy, is it going to be a bid that's competitive, or is it going to be quite a high bid, what we call a cover price, just to cover everything, just to make sure that we've done it, just to keep the client happy for commercial reasons. We want to keep our commercial relationship going with the client, so we want to make sure we do submit a bid, but it could be quite a high bid, and sometimes you could win them. All right. It's worth 16 out of 63 marks. So as I say, that's 25%. So when you combine both activity 1 and activity 4, is 28 marks out of 63, which comes to about 45%. So if you think about it, if you really didn't like the maths element, because not everybody's going to like the maths element, if you really revised really hard on this, you know, you could get 40 out of 45. Now, if you get 40 out of 45 or 35 out of 45, you sort of, there's a potential, even with just the written bit, of getting, certainly there's a potential, I'm not saying you would, it's a bit of a risk, there's a potential of still getting a merit. Okay, and then you add some maths on at the end, you try some of the easier unit rates and the preliminaries, and you fill in some of the bill of quantities, you know you're going to get at least 20 marks there, 15 to 20 marks, and sort of, you've got 35 marks, 40 marks for the written thing, you're up to about 50 marks. So think about it, you know, and it's one of the reasons why I went through this in a lot of detail back in the first term. Okay, because, you know, I knew there was around 40 to 50% of the marks here. All right. At distinction level, the learner will have arrived at the justified tender sum, including really what profit am I suggesting here. Okay. All right. So you're justifying why you've chosen that profit, why you've chosen that overheads. You've taken into consideration the risks that you identified and wrote about in activity 1. All right. So that's why, to be honest with you, it's one of the reasons why I suggest you do activity 1 and then activity 4, not the other way around, because you've got to understand those risks before you do activity 4. Okay, and that's why I would do it on the same day, because it's still fresh in your mind. All right. You also need to add in commercial intelligence, because you'll be given some competitors, and you've got to sort of write about those competitors. All right, and you'll know who those competitors are, because what you'll do is you'll ask suppliers in the area, is there anybody else approached you with regards to this sort of tender? All right, you also need to look at your current workload, your overheads for your office, you need to work out, because are we covered, or do we need to really win this contract to cover our overheads? Your attitude to risk. All right, it's a 16-week contract, remember, £85,000 liquidated in certain damages if you don't make it within 16 weeks. What's your organisation aspirations at the moment? And as I say, it's probably just to keep afloat at the moment. It's probably not to go bankrupt, probably not to keep everybody employed, so you're not making redundancies. All right, so you're ready basically you want to do that so you're ready. So when the market does pick up, you're ready to take advantage of that. Okay. So, you know, the fact that whatever happens, you've got to tender for this job, even if you don't want it. All right. Even if you don't want it, you've got to tender for it because you want to keep the client happy, because you want to remain on the client's tender list. Remember what I said again back probably in September. This is, the client will keep a list of contractors, preferred contractors it would like to use. And you've got to go through all of that process to get on that list. And the fact is that you're submitting a tender bid means that you are on the tender list. You have met pre-qualification. So you don't want to go through that again. So you want to make sure you submit something, even if it's a really high price. Okay. Recognize that you are a local company, so you understand the market. So that's quite good. That puts you in a strong position. However, you do have a office. All right, it's a regional office. Company overheads, if you divide, it's 1.5 million divided by 22 million. Your office overheads are 6.8%, so 6.82% actually, if you want an actual a more specific calculation. So around 7%, I would round that to 7%. All right, so you're looking to make sure you meet those at least, okay, because that includes all your office staff. It means you haven't got to. It means that you haven't got to sort of sell off your property or your assets. If you own it, you won't have problems paying the rent. If you like the lease, it would be a commercial lease. You won't have to make people redundant. All of these things you really don't want to do, really, to be honest with you. Recognize it's a depressed market. It's not a good market. It's not a buoyant market. So, all right. So that's a sort. And also, because you've met 90% of your turnover for the particular your annual turnover for that year, you only got to find another 1 million, 1.5 million, probably maybe 2 million. So you only need another contract really to sort of make the 22 million. You may want this one to pass you by. You may not want this particular contract because of the risks involved in it actually outweigh the gains, because you could probably think, well, I'll wait for another 1 or 2 million pound or 3 million pound sort of project to come onto the market. All right, because the liquidated damages are so high. All right, especially because it's a tight contract, 16 weeks, and you have got a relatively full order book at the moment. Okay, so you're not in a situation like some contractors would be in, where we must win it, otherwise we may have to make people redundant. We may go bankrupt. The bank is on to us. At the moment, you're in actually quite a good financial situation, okay? So these are the things, I've basically given you the answer there, but these are the things that I'm going to sort of explore in a little bit more detail now, okay? So again, if you have a look, I've highlighted things again. All right, highlight, make notes. Okay, the company has extensive knowledge. That's good. Okay, it's got good relationships with its suppliers and subcontractors in the region. Okay, it's got good networks. Yeah, all right. It understands the market conditions, not just nationally or globally, for this particular area. Okay, because some areas might be better than other areas. I was in Wales Thursday, and things are really bad in Wales compared to, say, Birmingham. All right, just to sort of let you know. So economically speaking, so it also depends on the region as well. There, all right, yeah. So the companies have contacted its network of suppliers in the area, and it's found out that there's 3 other companies, Company A, Company B, and Company C, they call them. That's your competitor companies. They're also bidding for this particular contract. One of them is local. The other 2 are national and regional, okay? the local one is probably going to be the one that probably may want the work more than anybody else. The reason being is that it's only at 75% capacity at the moment. So it's unlike you, which is at 90% capacity. You've reached 90% of your annual turnover. They've only met 75%. However, there's a risk for them as well because they're used to dealing with smaller type contracts. You know, their turnover is much less than yours, 8 million. So if you take 25, a quarter of 8 million, they've made 6 million to date. They've made 6 million turnover to date. They've got one contract like this are worth 2 million will mean, like you, they've met their annual turnover. However, like yourself, they are in a sort of a quandary whether to go for this because they're a similar company to you, working in a similar market. They're probably your main competitors, actually. Okay. It's got a good reputation as well. All right. So just to sort of let you know the sorts of things that's going on there, okay? So that they might actually go for it, but like you, they might be reticent because they know that there'll be other £1 or £2 million projects coming up in the pipeline, and they may think like you, well, do we really want this 16 weeks at £85,000 a week, liquidated and certain damages? That's a big risk. Yeah, the client itself is not very buoyant themselves. They're not very sort of financially buoyant themselves. They could go bust, and it could have a detrimental impact upon you. So they might, like you, they're in a similar position to you. Then the other two, one's regional, one's national. They'll both have much higher overheads than you guys, much higher overheads. Okay, they might make more money for you, a turnover like 90 million turnover and 900 million turnover, but their overheads will be a lot much larger because they'll have a lot more offices, they'll have bigger staffing, they'll pay their staff much more money. Especially the senior staff, they'll have they might have shareholders, they might be on the stock market, especially the national company. So they're quite high geared companies, if you like. However, because the reason they probably don't usually, if the market, for both of them, if the market was quite buoyant, they probably usually would ignore this type of job because it's only £2 or £3 million. They would prefer things like 10, £20 million projects. Certainly, contractor B with contractor C would probably prefer 50 or even £100 million contracts. You know, large contracts. You know, now suddenly they're forced because of the market. They're forced to take smaller contracts, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. So, and the reason they do that is that they don't want to make people redundant. They want to make sure that they keep their best staff. So they need to keep their order books up. So they'll start looking for smaller contracts at a local level. They'll try to squeeze out the local contractors like High Auburn. So both of them could go in for it quite keen on a very low profit or no profit margin at all because they're large firms. They can absorb a lot of the costs. Okay, they can absorb a lot of the costs. They also have the staff to carry out fast track construction, 16 weeks. So they would have specialist staff that would be used to such contracts. So they're quite well within their capacity to do this. The only trouble is they wouldn't know the local market as well as you guys, your companies. Some of the suppliers might not like working with them because they're big companies. They might not pay on time, so they might not pay in 28 days. They might pay in like 60 days or even 120 days. Some of the bigger contracts. So you're, as a supplier and a subcontractor at a local level, you might be waiting a long time for your money, and that's an issue with cash flow. So there's some issues there, but they are probably the ones that are going to go in the keenest for it. All right, as you say, I've gone through the market conditions. All right, very poor, Okay. All right, and it doesn't look like there's going to be an upturn. So it's about survival for everybody at the moment. Okay, so if we look at the things that I've said, your company, all right, that's High Holborn. Okay, you know the local market. Let's just do an analysis of the commercial intelligence. Let's be more specific. I've sort of done it for you just then, very generically. You know the local market. Your company knows the local market. It's established a good relationship with local suppliers and subcontractors. So it's able to make long-term relationships with them. Yeah. And you could both, you and the supplier, you and any subcontractor, could share some of the risks. So that's quite nice. That's the beauty of it. Okay. So risks and ends profit can be shared as long as you sort of share some of the profit between each other as well. You can help each other out. You're both local companies. You know each other. You might even, know each other on a more social basis. So you tend to try and help each other out. Furthermore, your company has already met 90% of its target for the year. All right. So it's not really in a position where it must win the contract. So it's in a better position than maybe some of the other, certainly the national and the regional company, B and C. You're in a pretty good position. You can make some choices. I would also say the same for competitor A as well. It might go in for a low bid because this would secure its annual turnover of 8 million. Okay, that's in your favor too. But whether it would like to take the same risks with regards to the time, the 16 weeks and the liquidated asserted damages, it might, they themselves are probably operating under a similar objective to High Holborn, your company. Let's just keep the order book going, keep turning over work, make sure we've got continuous work so we don't have to make anybody redundant. We're not in a precarious financial position, and let's just wait for the good times, so it's just really a matter of surviving in many respects. You're quite conservative. Local firms will be quite conservative in what their objectives are. Where contractor sort of B, your competitor B, it's a regional, and it might want to start to look at more work at a local basis. So it might like to spread its wings. It might be looking for an aggressive sort of commercial strategy to win more projects. Yes, okay, they're lower value projects, but more lower value projects, rather than have one £20 million contract or £10 million contract, have 5 or 5 to 8 £2 million or £3 million contracts. It allows you to stay buoyant. You're expanding your market, your range of sort of market activities. So when the market picks up, you could be in quite a strong position. So they're going to, I would assume that they're going to make quite a bold sort of strategy and go for it, to be honest with you. As I say, because they are a regional company, they would have the specialism for fast track construction, 16 weeks. The £85,000 a week wouldn't be such a big hit for the liquidate, but it's still quite a lot of money for them. And then you've got the national competitor, which is contractor C. Similar in many respects, probably just surviving. That's why it's after some local work. It can take on a lot of those risks because it's a big company. It can bear a lot of financial difficulty because it is a big company. £85,000 a week won't be as frightening or as risky for competitor B and competitor C as it is for competitor A and yourself. So I would say that the regional and the national contractors there, B and C, would probably make a very keen bid, low profit rate, with yourself and maybe A maybe a lot more conservative in the bid that you make, a much higher bid. So that's what you would sort of write about. You write about what each company, you do an analysis on it. 16 marks, there's a good 5 marks there. All right, out of 16 there. Okay, maybe even 6 marks there. Okay, so distinction answer there. Then you look at yourself in more detail. You're working at 90% capacity, so you're on track. Okay, your overheads are 1.5 million, your office overheads. So I make a quick calculation, so about 7%. So we just got to make sure we sort of cover those overheads. However, we do have this sort of loss that we've got to make up for as well. So we've got to bear in mind that as well. So as I say, that coupled with the fact that you're on quite a good financial standing at the moment, and the fact that your short-term goals are really survival, if you like, keep your market position in the locality. All right, you probably might not want to win the contract, to be honest with you. So you might use a strategy where you actually produce your bill of quantities and add on quite a large percentage for overheads and profit. You might still win. You see, your reputation might actually get you through. So this means that the contract does not have to win the tender bid, but you should still produce one to keep the client happy, to stay on the client's list. Remember to say that. Okay, don't forget to say that. That's really important. All right, so the fact that you're saying, look, I don't have to win it, that doesn't matter. You're actually, that's what a lot of managing directors would sort of come up to, what the decision they would make. But it would depend ultimately on what the philosophy of the company actually is. All right, but because they're well on their way to actually making those turnovers and meeting the overhead costs, the only thing that I would be worried about myself is that £500,000 in loss that they made the previous year. They'd have to pay that back eventually, because the bank, they would probably owe the bank that, yeah, some money there. Okay. Another potential is the short duration period and the high liquidity. Very much more difficult for a smaller company to bear those risks, all right, than there is those larger companies, even though one of the mitigating factors, as we said earlier, is the fact that you are used to work like this. It's very familiar work. So 16 weeks might not be a problem for you. Okay, all right, but if suddenly you do find a problem and you start to go overtime, if you like, £85,000 over 3 or 4 weeks could actually bankrupt you. I know it doesn't seem a lot, but actually it could end up bankrupting you. So it's quite a high risk there, all right? But there is a sort of caveat to that. However, the competitive market and economic downturn may minimize inflationary pressures, okay? Because there's an economic downturn, it might actually force inflation down. It might force interest rates down as well, for people to sort of just to make it a little bit better. So as everyone in the supply chain will want to win the contract, and everybody in the supply chain, all the contractors and suppliers, they'll be in the same position as everybody else looking for work. So they will reduce their prices, their profit margins, to win that particular, to win work with regards to that particular project. So, and what you've got to remember, one of the beauties, because you are a local company, we're used to working with these suppliers and subcontractors in the area. They would probably, you might come up with a joint strategy, a partnering strategy with them. So they would probably charge you less than, so certainly, maybe not A, because they'd have a similar sort of strategy with your competitor A, but competitor B and C, as you say, because they're bigger companies, they may not pay on 30 days. They may have 60 days, 45, 60, 75, 120 days payments. So the suppliers and subcontractors are waiting 1 month, 2 months, 3 months for their money. And in that time, obviously, they might have to borrow money to survive. So the suppliers might not wish to work with them for that reason. Okay. So there are some, if you like, mitigating factors there. all right, which will help. All right. Conclusion. I think the risks outweigh the positives, particularly as the company's in a good economic position. If it was in a weaker economic position, I think if they've met 90% of their annual turnover, if they've met around 75 or 70% or even 80%, I might come to a different conclusion. So they're not in a position where they must win. Okay, they're not. So these high risks, tight contract program, high liquidated damages, all right, linked to quite a full order book at the moment, means they don't need to win this particular tender. However, they still need to produce one. You must make sure you say that if you come to that conclusion. So you've got future work with that client if you want it in the at another date. So therefore, a high profit margin, maybe, I don't know, 7 to 10%, maybe high profit margin with a realistic overhead rates that's over 7% is appropriate. So I put 7% profit margin. I think you could even justify 10%, to be honest with you, and 10% overhead. So together, 17%, maybe 20, 25% even, to be honest with you. All right, and you may still win the contract. You never know. And if you do, well, you're gonna make some money on this one. That's the beauty. Okay, so that's it really. That's the sort of thing that you need to write about with regards to this. Okay, thank you guys. Any questions, come back to me.